My sincere thanks to our friends over on Patreon. I appreciate your continued support. I'd also welcome you to join us in the More Christ community. If you do so, you'll receive a number of perks, including our online book club, where you'll receive free ebooks, early access to new episodes of More Christ, and promotions for in-person events. I'd also welcome you to share the podcast, and give a 5-star rating depending on where you're listening or watching the podcast. And thank you all, and God bless. Hi, welcome to More Christ. I'm Marcus. Today I'm joined by Adam Coleman. Adam is the author of Black Victim to Black Victor, an op-ed writer, a public speaker, and the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. He's a columnist for Human Events, a frequent contributor for the New York Post and the Publica. His articles published in Newsweek, The Federalist, The Epoch Times, Daily Mail, Post Millennial, Long List, Unheard, Scoon TV, Free Black Thought, Life News, HQ, and Human Defense Initiative. I suppose, first of all, this evening slash this afternoon, Adam, I wanted to ask you if you could share a bit about your story. I suppose, in light of what you've shared in recent articles, I want to quote a wee bit which struck me. After years of financial struggle, a short stint of homelessness, and having to move back home a couple of times, I was finally secure in my financial independence. I thought I made it to where I was supposed to be, but then everything changed in 2020. I wonder if you might tell us what happened, maybe leading up to then, and what are some of the key elements that have helped form you and the man that you are now then?
Man, there's a lot. I would say, to kind of summarize, my 20s and leading into my early 30s was a struggle. There was one point I was homeless for a little bit, and got some help from some strangers, to be honest with you, helped me out until I got on my feet. I moved out of state to Tennessee and moved back. I was actually homeless in Tennessee for a couple months while I was out there, and then moved back to New Jersey. I've been in New Jersey since, but just financially, it's been a struggle. Whether it's finding a decent job, things seem to be going well, but that job is killing me, stress-wise, and it's hard to turn away because it's good money, and having to turn away from it. And it was during around 2008, so the financial crash was happening, so a lot of people were unemployed. I haven't really talked about this, but I don't know how unemployment works where you're at, but over here, you obviously have to apply for it. And if they deny your unemployment for whatever reason, you can appeal it. And so they had denied my unemployment, of course, because that's what the government does, because they don't want to pay any money. So then I appealed it, but the problem was a lot of people were appealing. And so it literally took, I want to say, 8 months to have my appeal, not even to win it, but just to have my appeal hearing, which is basically a phone call. And so that means that I was 8 months of not getting any income. And I had to find other ways to try to make some money, as far as nothing illegal, but just like selling stuff online. Closer to the point of having my appeal hearing, I ended up getting a job doing customer service. But at that job, I was literally making half the amount of money that I was making prior, which led to me having my car repossessed. So it was a whole bunch of stuff that's happened. But things were there. Economically, it was like I was making headway, then something happens, lose my job. I was making headway again and switched jobs, and I got fired after 2 weeks because I got sick. And I guess me being sick, I didn't look enthusiastic about the job. So so they fired me. And what happens is, if you don't stay at a job longer than 6 weeks, you don't qualify for unemployment. So I went through that whole process again. So it's been that kind of thing. But even out of that came my career opportunity, actually, because I finally was able to break into IT. Once I broke into IT, then my career started to actually take off. So it was actually a good thing I got fired after 2 weeks and go through that struggle. So I try to see the positive in things, even in that moment where, like, man, this is a struggle. It's like, but I came out of it, and I'm more confident in myself because I came out of it. and you just never know what's going to happen at the end of it. So to kind of bring it to 2020, I was an IT manager. Um, you know, I was making good money, independent. Started traveling. I was telling you before, I've been to London a number of times, and been to London once prior to 2020. So I was doing my own thing, and I feeling like I was like finally coming into my own. And then 2020 happened with COVID and George Floyd. And that's when I felt like I wasn't able to express myself. Like I wasn't a public person. I didn't have a public profile. I didn't really even use social media. I wasn't really a fan. Um, I'm still not that much of a fan, but I use it. Um, but I it's one thing to choose not to say something. It's another thing to feel like you're not allowed to say something.
Mhm.
And that's what it felt like. It felt like the media, people on social media, everybody gets to speak for my existence as a Black American, except for me, right? It's not allowed, I'm not allowed to say anything unless I'm just regurgitating what they're saying. So that's when I started going onto free speech forums to figure out, like, am I the only one that feels this way? You know, because at first you feel kind of crazy because you turn on the TV, turn on social media, and everybody is having a panic attack.
Mhm.
And I wasn't. I don't know who George Floyd is, and I've been Black my entire life, and I've never felt the way that they are expressing. And I know a lot of Black people don't feel the way that they're expressing. But am I alone in wanting to say something about it? I got encouragement actually from the people in the free speech forums to actually write more often because of how I express myself. Um, so, and to kind of rewind a little bit, the year prior, I thought about writing a book, um, something revolving around questioning things, but I had no idea what to write. I think I sat down for like a day and that was it. So uh, when I got the encouragement from these people, and then I was like, you know what? Maybe this is the book idea that I was waiting for.
Mhm.
So I was just like, let me just try and just figure it out from there. So from that point on, it took me about 9 months from start to finish. Um, my wife helped me edit it. She was she my girlfriend at the time?
Mhm.
She helped me edit it, and yeah, I was just really happy as to how it came out, and the response I got from people to understand what I was trying to say and understand the temperament. Um, and it, I'm really proud of the book, to be honest with you.
Well, that's brilliant. Thanks so much. I appreciate that, Adam. And some of your experiences really resonated with me. I think from a Christian perspective, I've been out of jobs and different things in the past, and it's hard to even find the passion to get into one because there's so many ones that are available that are anti-Christian and all this kind of stuff, which makes it even more complicated. You'd have to sort of
Yeah.
sell your soul to get there. So it's a constant struggle for me nowadays. Like, so I appreciate where you're coming from.
Um, so I haven't, so I am a Christian.
Hmm.
Um, although I am looking to get baptized probably in February. Um, and I'm looking forward to that. I've talked about it a little bit as far as I was never an atheist. I grew up, we moved around a lot and we never had a consistent church or anything like that. There were period we were in a Catholic church and then a Baptist church, and so we were just bouncing around. And even with us going to church was just inconsistent. Um, and when I became a young adult, like in my early 20s, I like had like a moment of just asking myself, like, am I a Christian? I tell people I'm a Christian, but am I really? Do I really believe this? And I think after that conversation, I accepted that I was agnostic. I wasn't confident enough to be so certain that there is nothing. But I was like, but I feel like there might be something. I just have no idea. It's just kind of like the shrugging of the shoulders kind of perspective. But like all those things that I told you about, like I could break down even after 2020, especially. But I could break down all those moments, like the pitfalls and after the pitfalls, something completely unexpected happens because I just stayed in it. Something I thought I was supposed to do and someone prevented me from doing it, right? And it ended up being the best move. People who looked out for me and didn't have to. I look at all these things as like signs. Um, I look at all the trouble that I went through, the struggle that I went through, overcoming stuff like social anxiety. I see these as tests, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and tests of strength. So I truly feel like I don't regret anything that I went through. All the bad times, I'm glad I went through them because now I can talk about it and I have a platform where people hear and resonate with what I'm saying. And so I think the biggest thing, just like how I felt like I was alone and how I felt, George Floyd and everything, a lot of people feel alone and like, am I the only one that's struggling with this issue? Am I the only man that feels this particular way? And I'm being told I'm not supposed to feel this way. And it's like, no, you're not. And knowing that you're not alone is incredibly important, because then it's like, okay, I'm not alone. And on top of that, someone made it out of it. How can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing I'll say is, um, whether you want to say it's my purpose or God's purpose for me, my purpose is to help people in any way possible, right? Um, I've always worked in customer service in some form or fashion, whether I was doing IT or over the phones, tech support, or whatever it might be. I've always felt good helping people. I always felt like, especially if they were thankful, like I want to go above and beyond to make sure that you're good. And that's the type of person that I am. I truly enjoy helping people. I try to mentor people when I can. I look out for people. I'll see sometimes people tweet stuff of distress and I reach out to them and I talk to them and it privately. And I'm not doing this for clout. I'm like, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we're having a dialogue. And sometimes people come back to me later, like, thank you so much for reaching out to me because I really needed that. One man in particular was isolated in his home, and I had him call me. Like he was so isolated that he got rid of his cell phone, and he had thoughts of suicide. I don't want to get into his situation, but I had him call me, and we just talked. I was driving somewhere. I was driving to work, and I said, "Call me," and we talked for about an hour. And this was last year sometime. And I would check in with him every so often. And recently he told me that he's back to work. And he said, thank you so much for being there and talking to me. And it was only because he made a message. I was talking about something. I think I was talking about anxiety or social anxiety. And he made a message that sounded like he's still in it. And it wasn't, it sounded like I felt like I needed to reach out to him, basically. Um, and I just trust my instinct when it comes to stuff like that. Like, I need to reach out to this person, and I'm glad that I did. Maybe I prevented him from doing something that he regret, you know. So I'm really glad I was able to help a stranger overcome that moment, because when I was talking to him, he was really defeated, and he said I gave him some hope, and that's really hard to get.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Adam. And
Yeah.
I actually wanted to touch upon some of your influences and ask about, are there any figures who've been especially inspirational or influential for you? And one that I can think of is someone like Thomas Sowell, who I also adore. And I wonder if you might speak to that a little bit.
It's interesting because I think a lot of the influential figures are people that I've actually encountered.
Hmm.
I've never been one for like, I try not to be someone who's like all about like celebrity culture or like having idols who are so distant that you'll never touch them. My influences have basically been like mentors for me. I might actually write about this soon. It's funny that you asked this question, but uh, one of my influences is actually a mentor now is my friend Batya. She's the opinion editor for Newsweek. She's been on Fox News plenty of times, The Hill. She was a co-host on The Hill Rising for quite a while. And she's just been a great friend. You know, I've met her husband and her friends and been to her place multiple times for dinner. Anytime, because she's Jewish, anytime there's some sort of Jewish gathering or celebration, she invites me over to be part of it. And I really appreciate it because she doesn't have to invite me. And, you know, she lives out in Brooklyn. I'm in New Jersey. So, you know, it's like an hour drive. It's not a big deal. You know, she's just always been a wonderful person and someone career-wise I've kind of looked up to as well. She doesn't have all the answers and she'll never claim that she has all the answers, but she's ahead of me and she's willing to help in any way possible. She's given my name out when she didn't have to. She's given me advice. One particular moment, I was having kind of like a mid-career crisis, just trying to figure out like, what exactly do I want to do with this? And because it was after a particular event that I went to, and I was like, I don't want to be like that. Like, if that's what success looks like, I don't want to be like that. And quite literally, I reached out to her. I was like, I need to talk to you. Can we meet and have lunch? And she agreed. And it was like a week later, we just sat and talked for like 2-3 hours. And she made me feel a lot better as far as like how I see things, but also encouraged me to write. Like, you have to write about this. And I was afraid to kind of write about it. And you know, she encouraged me to do that. So she's been a strong mentor for me. I've told you this, and she's one of the most humble people ever. So, you know, it's hard to, I'm like that too. I'm bad with compliments. I don't know how to handle them, but, you know, she's been someone I'm really thankful for having a chance meeting. You know, she's the first, I would say, major publication that I wrote for, and she found me on Twitter. You know, and she gave me an opportunity, and I took it. So I'm just really thankful for her. So I don't know about like influence, but like maybe influence / mentor. She's someone who is at the top of the list amongst a lot of people, to be honest with you. But yeah, Thomas Sowell is impactful in a little bit of ways. Not as great as a lot of people might assume. You know, I actually have a drawing that someone made of Thomas Sowell on my wall. So, but he's an influential figure as far as like a thinker, especially as someone who used to be a leftist and kind of hit reality and is like, that this stuff doesn't work. And just profoundly intellectual and wise. You know, I look up to people who are wise. I like people, you know, wisdom comes with experience and time. And I look up to people who are like that. So yeah, I guess you could say Thomas Sowell a little bit.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Adam. And again, it's something I can sympathize with. As a kid, I would have self-identified as very like socialistic and would have thought like your fellow Americans, like Howard Zinn, the great thing and everything. But now, thank God, I've come to, I hope, some semblance of wisdom over time, but influenced by other people and helped by other people greatly. And
Yeah.
yeah, so another thing I want to ask you about a little bit is your recent experience at the ARC conference and this
Yeah.
recent article of yours, How God's Plan led me to the ARC conference. I wonder if you might tell us a bit about that and why it and the work of folks like Peterson and that whole project is important then.
Yeah, so just to explain what ARC is, it stands for the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. I didn't even know it formed. It actually formed this year. So it's kind of incredible what they were able to put together in less than a year. It was formed in April, and it was spearheaded by Jordan Peterson. You know, he's definitely an influential figurehead for the organization. And it was set up as the counter to the World Economic Forum. So the emphasis is to bring together people who are influential, top of whatever industry, whether it be politics, whether it be media, just put together like-minded people from all over the world. It was 1,500 people from 73 countries. And on top of that, it was invite only. They had an invite committee, and so it was only specific people that were invited, and only specific people that came. So it was definitely unique because it was invite only. I've been to conventions before, and this isn't like a typical convention. Everybody that was there was somebody, even if you didn't know who they were. And it was just a matter of like trying to figure out like, who is this person? One of the funnier moments, I was sitting at the table with Tina Deskovich with Moms for Liberty and Billboard Chris. And we were sitting together having breakfast, and there's these two guys from Slovenia that were sitting at the table with us. So Tina's looking at the one guy, she's like talking about herself, and then she was saying like, so, what do you do? Because we don't know who anybody is. And he's like, oh, I was the former prime minister of Slovenia. She's like, I'm sorry. You don't hear that often. Like, oh yeah, I was the prime minister. That was a while ago. Anyways, and the guy that was sitting next to him was a party leader in Slovenia. So it was that kind of event. It was just all these different people from all over. The first day, it was everybody kind of asking themselves like two questions. What's the purpose of this? And what do you think will come out of this? Like those the main two questions like everybody was asking, including myself, because it was unique. A lot of the conferences that are right-leaning that I've been to are kind of like, some of them, I won't say all of them, some of them are kind of like cheerleading, rah, everybody just, a ton of speeches of saying the same stuff over and over.
Yeah.
But this wasn't that. This was very purposeful. Like there was a theme for each day. There weren't too many speeches. There weren't too many panels. There were lots of breaks because they wanted you to actually interact and network with people. But I got my answer as far as like, what's the purpose of the event? Actually, the first night. So the event was during the day, but they also had nighttime get-togethers that you had to sign up for ahead of time, and they were based on region. So I did the one for North America, and it was basically like cigar lounges, right, with an open bar. So it was like 3 rooms, and it was limited capacity. So I was on the list. I went up in there, and I'm looking around. It's Dr. Roz, Senator Mike Lee, a Canadian parliament member, and just like some other people that are kind of sprinkled in that you don't know who they are. But the one guy who was with ARC, he gave a short speech, and he looked at all of us and said, now talk to someone you don't know, right? And now I think that encapsulated the whole point of this event. They have no idea what's going to come from it. He actually told a story. I won't even attempt to tell the story, but it was basically about these guys who were from different industries who kind of came together, and they created stuff that we still use to this day, but all because they came together like in a very casual manner, like, for drinks and stuff like that. And they would meet up like once a month or something like that. And they had no idea that, this type of thing would happen. They were just meeting up because they liked each other. But something came from that event of just actually getting together and speaking with each other. And that's what they were trying to replicate. They're trying to replicate, I hate to say like the political right, because I don't think it's necessarily that. I want to say is people who are in the center, maybe center right, because it definitely wasn't far right or anything like that. I wouldn't put in that framing. But it was to put these people who typically wouldn't encounter each other, quite literally would never meet each other, together so they can possibly collaborate, possibly help each other, to establish connections. And it's actually helped me out even so far. You know, I got another writing opportunity coming from it. There's a think tank that I'm keeping in contact with the person from there. Met some people from Sweden. You know, so just I met Dr. Roz and Dr. Warren Farrell. So it's that kind of thing it made it real special, to be honest with you.
That's excellent. Thanks, Adam. And I suppose, what do you hope that your unique contribution could be to that? And what do you have you taken away that you're going to work on now? You've sort of hinted at a few things there. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
Um, as far as my contribution, you mean to ARC or just like in general?
Beyond ARC, I suppose.
Okay,
So I'll give you a bit of a context. I've been
sure.
quite friendly myself with Jonathan Pajot, who's one of the main guys behind ARC. And
He actually spoke. He spoke at the
yeah,
event.
yeah, he gave a great speech too. And
Mhm.
he came to Ireland. We did an event in Dublin there a few months ago, and I didn't really have a clear set of goals and everything for my YouTube channel. So he gave me some very practical business advice, so to speak. So, what are you going to do next, and what's your unique contribution, and so on. So it really got me to think, and I set up a Patreon community from that and different things. I started doing merchandise and everything,
Mhm.
just small things really to try and make this a passion of mine something more than just a little side project. So it's kind of
Right.
intrigued from your perspective, what you're hoping to get out of it, I suppose.
Um, 2023 has been an interesting year. Um, you know, I think last year it was kind of like, um, yeah, I want to say last year was kind of me exploring, right? Just like trying anything and everything. Like, someone invited me to do something, I just did it. If you want me to write somewhere, I just wrote. Um, but the end of last year was when I decided to do this more in a full-time manner because things were heading in that direction. Like quite literally, I think it was like the week I went, yeah, the week I like fully started going full time was probably like the busiest week I've had. And it was like that for a number of weeks where I had, I think it was like 5 articles published in a week for 4 publications. Um, and it was crazy. And then on top of that, I had a bunch of interviews. I think I had like 3 interviews. Uh, I think it was 3 TV appearances in 3 countries in that week. So it was that kind of like, holy shit, kind of kind of moment. But this year has been interesting because with me really diving into being full-time and talking to someone like Batia, and that happened earlier this year, quite literally at the beginning of this year, talking to her and kind of figuring out what's my path. And so my path is to be authentic to myself. I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to have come through. The reason why I talk about my struggles is because I want to help somebody by talking about it. And even if it's just one person, that's one more person than before if I said nothing. Um, I want to be relatable because I'm a regular person, right? And I want to be able to express ideas and see things and talk about things that other people aren't expressing. Um, I think, especially in the political cultural realm, there's a lot of like low hanging fruit. Let's just say that a lot of low hanging fruit, and it's not interesting to me whatsoever. There are certain topics I don't talk about because it's talked to death. Even race, me writing my book, I really don't like talking about race all that much because I said what I needed to say. In certain circumstances, if I feel it's necessary to say something, then I will. But I don't jump on every, ambiguous thing. I want it to be with purpose. Um, I want to not talk about stuff because it's purposeful for me to not talk about it. And I've actually had people notice, like, you didn't talk about this. I'm like, yeah, specifically, and I tell them why. And I think talking about something is just as important to know when to talk about it versus and it's also important to know when not to talk about something as well. And I see a lot of people stretching to talk about something that they have no idea what they're talking about, right? So I quite literally stay in my wheelhouse as far as topics that feel comfortable for me, which thankfully is a lot of things. And I'm glad I haven't been pigeonholed to talk about just race,
Mhm.
or being Black or anything like that. Because to me that's old, and it gets boring really fast. I want to talk about what it's like to be a father. I want to talk about what it's like, protecting children. I want to talk about all of these things that really matter to a lot of people, but they're not given the opportunity to write for the New York Post or to write for different publications, to have their voice heard, like a very common sense, understandable, relatable viewpoint that's not hyperbolic.
Mhm.
I'm a very, very rational, empathetic person. That's just my nature. And to talk about, like, my recent article talking about leftists and loneliness, right? Nobody on the political right would write something like that. And actually, it took off. It went pretty viral because of that. And it was a rare moment of empathy that a lot of people, like, I was just on Tommy Lahiren's show. Mike Huckabee, former governor, said this is an astounding article that he wrote. Just all of these different people were like, wow, I never thought of it like that. I never saw it that way. And I'm like, good. Like, we need to start seeing things this way, because there's a lot of dehumanization that happens on both sides, right? And that's the easiest way to destroy your opponent, is to make them not appear human. They're monsters, they're evil. But actually, they're just flawed human beings, just like you are. So why don't you try to figure out why they're flawed? you know and I don't think all these people are evil or monsters. Maybe sometimes they do things that are evil, right, thinking that they're doing something good.
Mhm.
I've written about, are they evil people, or they just possess evil ideas? And I tend to think that there are more people who possess evil ideas thinking that they're actually beneficial, versus someone who is truly evil and knows that they're doing something wrong. um and I think we should ask these questions, right? But the only way you'd ask these questions is if you don't see the person who differs from you as automatically evil. So that I try to talk about ideas versus people, but I criticize people with power because they deserve criticism. So I guess that's like the long way of saying I try to do my wheelhouse, and my purpose is to talk about very specific things at very specific times. Or, like, as my Substack is, I want to speak wrong at the right time,
Mhm.
so to
Yeah.
speak.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Adam. And it's interesting you should say that too at this moment, because recently I'm hoping to have an interview with Tammy Peterson, Jordan's wife, and I've been
Mhm.
listening to a lot of her podcasts to try and get more in touch with her mindset and her soul and so on. And she had I was listening through I was doing some work outside, and the podcasts are just playing one after the other, so to speak. So I
Mhm.
had my ones that I was particularly interested, the guests I was particularly interested in, and it just rolled on to the next one, and I had things in my hand, so I couldn't just turn it off. I was listening to it, and it was this lady, Lauren Southern, who I'd sort of
Mhm.
always just assumed she was some sort of far right nut job, and wouldn't have bothered to listen to her. And then they were speaking about her entering this political arena from a young age, and when she hadn't developed her thoughts and everything, and people jumped on her whenever she garnered this following, and then people jumped on her whenever her marriage didn't work out and everything. And I was really convicted by it. I was struck that
Yeah.
this lady had this nuance to her, this emotional depth, this maturity. And this is somebody that I would have just looked and thought, no, it's some like weird right wing nutter, and dehumanized them like that. And I think there's this perpetual danger of that, to your point. And it's also interesting for another reason what you say. in line of Jonathan Pajot, who I mentioned. I had a great conversation with him and a philosopher called Bernardo Kastrup, and they were talking about the diamond in philosophical terms, or Jonathan would say the guardian angel, and how we have to go with this higher self to be authentic. I think to your point, and it might be uncomfortable, but that's the real you beyond this little construct that you have of yourself. And
Right.
I'm glad to hear that you're getting baptized too. I think that's powerful, and it sort of it clicks in my mind with some of the things that we've been discussing. Um, Going beyond those little political camps, and Jordan, figures like that have talked about how we've collapsed the religious kind of spiritual language into the political realm, and then what happens is you have this kind of demonization of other people. So rather than having an abstract realm where you have demons and things like that, you have this, oh, the right wing people are the demons, or the left wing people are the demons, and so on. So I
Mhm.
appreciate what you're doing in terms of the content that you're putting out, as well as the character that you're communicating, if that makes sense.
Right. No, no, it makes perfect sense. I I can't stand the oversimplification to destroy people that you don't agree with. It's fine to like, I'm not a particular fan of Democrats right now, but I don't slander them just cause, right?
Hmm.
Um, I personally, and I think I've said this before, I would love to have two sane, rational political parties that actually cared about what average people want. But we don't have two sane, rational political parties that want that. We have one that's an elitist party that overwhelmingly cares about what the upper class wants, which is why they care about what progressives want, because many of the progressive influences are of the upper class, right? And it goes hand in hand. So they just spout their garbage that makes no sense, right? It makes no sense to regular people who aren't ideologues, right? And then you have a Republican Party that's just less of an issue, right? Um, they have good ideas, terrible implementation, like all the time. They have good ideas, terrible messaging. And I see that as a genuine problem, because you can have great ideas, but if you can't convey it to people and convince people, like I literally talk to people who think that you shouldn't try to convince anyone. And I'm like, how do you think politics works?
Mm.
Like, why do they pay all this money for advertising? To convince you to vote for them. They think you're just supposed to do it, and it's just supposed to be self-evident. You're supposed to vote for Republicans. And it's like, no, that's not how people work. It's never been how people work. People want to be convinced, even when they say they don't want to be convinced, right? You have to persuade people. You have to persuade people with like good information. You have to persuade people by appealing to emotions, right?
Mhm.
And you can do things manipulative, or you can do things overt, but you have to try to persuade people. And that's what I try to do. I try to persuade people that this is a good idea, because it is a good idea, right? I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to make it relatable so you understand my point. I've talked about illegal immigration, where like the Republican messaging is talking about fiscal issues, talking about how much it costs, but that's not what appeals to people. What appeals to people is people, right? You can say, because it's true, that this is human trafficking, that men, uh, probably men too, but women and children are being raped, right? There are families that are being displaced. You're allowing cartel members to dictate the lives of people from all over the world. Some of them who are desperate, some of them who are just taking the opportunity of having an open border. That's the reality that's happening. There's human suffering that's happening at the southern border. People are being displaced, coming here under false pretenses, who think that we're just a land of gold, and if they just show up here, they'll become rich. It's like, no, we work really hard here. We work a lot, and we work really hard. And even that sometimes relegates you to just working class status. So yes, we have opportunities, we have wealth, but these people are being taken advantage of and believing that they're going to be saved by coming here. We are safer. If safety is an importance, then yeah, we're safer. But I mean, also to a degree, because if you're that poor, you might end up in a dangerous neighborhood and it may not be as safe. So it really, that's how you would actually want to talk about the illegal immigration situation from a human perspective. So I think we need better rhetoric when it comes to stuff like that. But I don't know if I veered off, but
No,
that's
that's
what I was
great. Thanks, Adam.
saying.
And and I think another thing that I appreciate about your work is this element of the road to hell can be paved with good intentions, and we have to go beyond good intentions. And that's something I
Right.
like about Jordan Peterson and folks like that too, that this is the good side of pragmatism. You do look at the byproducts of these things, and it's not just prepositional, it's not just this idea that I have. It has to be properly incarnated, to use the sort of Christian language. And
Mhm.
this thing that Christ says and Jordan refers to, by their fruits you shall know them. I suppose if you might be bored to death, as you as you say, with speaking about the book, but I'd like to, if we can explore a few things about your book, would you be happy to do that? Tie it
Yeah,
in with.
absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
if we might talk about black victim to black victor, then identifying the ideologies, behavioral patterns, and cultural norms that encourage a victimhood complex. And again, to what you're saying before, this goes beyond race, and I think your insights are applicable increasingly in places like Ireland, which is part of the reason why I'm interested in talking to you. So,
Yep.
I suppose first of all, building upon what we've talked about already, what moved you to write that book, and what do you hope that readers will ultimately take away from it then?
Um, I mean, like I was saying before, I think what had me start that process was feeling like I wasn't allowed to speak, and I really wanted to say something. I'm kind of one of those people, not to the nth degree of like authority, but when someone tells me not to do something, it makes me want to do it even more. And I deal with that sometimes online, when people are like, you know, you should have said it like this. I'm like, well, I didn't. And I'm gonna keep saying it like that. Like those are the times that I get adversarial with people online, with strangers. It is my biggest pet peeve when someone tells me I should have done it this way, I should do it this way. Or I'm not allowed to do this. I'm not allowed. Don't tell me what. I'm a grown man. Like, don't tell me what I'm supposed to do. You don't even know who I am. Anyways, beyond that, I felt like I wasn't allowed to say something, which pushed me to want to say something. I thought about my son. Um, I thought about all these things that were happening with all the riots that were going on. I thought about all those things. And they were my motivation. And actually, 2020 was the perfect time to write it because quite literally, I would be driving. There was a period of time where I was living far from my job and I was driving to work for like an hour to hour and a half each way. No, it was probably about an hour and a half each way. But I was listening to podcasts and then I was listening to an event and then something would happen. Something racial was happening again. And then I'd listen to it and I'd be like, ah, this pisses me off. So then I get to the office and then I would spend an hour, hour and a half writing about it, including it in the book. That happened multiple times. Um, so it was a perfect time to kind of talk about these things um, within the book. But what I'll say is like the process of writing it was interesting for me because I didn't know how to write a book. I'm not a trained writer. I didn't even go to college. I went to tech school. So I just know how to communicate. I know how to talk. And the writing is like anything else. The more you write, the better you get. It's about finding your voice. So all I knew was that I wanted to talk about race. And I came up with some chapters and stuff like that. And then over time, some of those chapters go away or they get fused together. But then when I was trying to ultimately answer the question that everybody's asking, what's the biggest problem facing Black Americans? I was like, well, it's family, right? And so actually, speaking of people who come into your life, a friend of mine at the time, I sent her a sample early on of what I wrote. And I was like, oh, what do you think? And she's like, it's good, but women read books too.
Mm.
And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, there's no emotion in it. I was like, that's a good point. There is no emotion in it. So I made it that from that point on, I was like, you know what would really help is like if I tell stories and if I tell my story. And so that's why you see like a theme like with my Substack. Most of the stuff I write in my Substack are personal. They're stories. I'm storytelling. And I realized like storytelling is really relatable. It's really humanizing to talk about it in that particular way. Even the leftism and loneliness article, I talk about my friend who died from an overdose. Like, and I talk about myself being an outcast, and I understand like storytelling is incredibly powerful, and I don't see it enough within in the political realm, but that's just more room for me. Um, but uh, yeah, I think that's kind of what led up to me wanting to write the book. What I want people to take from the book is ultimately at the end of the book, I have 9 solution chapters because I didn't want to just complain. Often people just make books and complain about stuff and have no solution. I just wanted like realistic views of the world, ways that people can see the world, whether they're black or white. But I wanted to bring across that we have more in common than we do different. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. And after writing the book, my thesis is absolutely true because most of the people who reach out to me and say, I had a childhood experience like that. I know someone who went through that. My cousin's going through that. My family member is going through that. I've had people who worked in juvenile detention, right? And they say 99% of the kids are coming from that scenario. They have no parents or just one parent, right? Like that's not a coincidence. And they don't look like me. These people, most of the time, do not look like me. The way we kind of talk about single parenthood is framed as it's a black issue. Is it disproportionate in our demographic? Yeah. But if you think about it in another way, there are more white people who are growing up in separated homes than black people. If you think about it that way, because they're a majority population.
Mhm.
So it's if that's the case, and actually Hispanics are even higher than for white Americans. I think white Americans are somewhere in the 30% range. I think Hispanics are about 50%. So, and we have a growing Hispanic population in our country. So family separation is a really, really big issue. And it's going to become more and more dramatic. Like quite literally, most of the social issues that we talk about, whether it's homelessness, drug addiction, crime, all link back to family dysfunction. School shootings. I wrote an article talking about this. It's documented. The vast majority of those schools, like 9 out of 10 kids who do the school shootings, come from single parent homes, foster homes, adoption, divorce, right? They do not come from happy, secure homes with both parents. Like overwhelmingly, that's not the case. And that's actually like the most important thing I want people to take from the book, as to how important it is, because the child that you do not raise is going to be the child that society has to pay for. Whether it's they have to pay to house them in jail, or somebody's paying maybe with their life, right? Because that child killed somebody, right? So everybody else pays for that. And that child suffers, and that child takes out their anger and frustration on the rest of the world. And they don't believe they can change. They don't believe they can heal. This is who they are. No one cares about them. And that this is ultimately what we're seeing. So I even with my article writings, that's like the number one thing that I try to find an area to talk about. If it means talking about my situation growing up without my father, then so be it. I have no problem talking about it. If it helps someone realize, like, you know what, I need to check on my kid. I need to be careful with the next person I sleep with. Maybe I need to have a little bit more purpose, then that's what it is. So
I'm into that. And yeah, I grew up for most of my life without my father too. He died when I was quite young.
Mm.
Again, so a lot of that resonates with me. But I also think it's interesting, and Oz Guinness, who you might have met at the conference in London, he has this lovely quote that I think of often about contrast is the mother of clarity. So I suppose to draw the contrast then, I have a friend, another friend, a professor from the States, actually, Nancy Piercy, and she's written this book, The Toxic War on Masculinity, and talks about how masculinity is seen as problematic in and of itself rather than there can be aberrations from, you can have good masculinity and bad masculinity and so on.
Right.
And I want to contrast that with your experiences of fatherhood and positive male mentors and so on. And what are we getting wrong in that very black and white way of looking at the issue? And would you care to speak to that?
Yeah. Um, so just so people understand, I didn't grow up with my father. I rarely saw him. Um, you know, for all intents and purposes, like my father was a stranger. Um, and he died a number of years ago, when I was as an adult. I think it was in my early 30s when he passed away. And I found out that he died about 3 months after he died. So to kind of give you an idea like how disconnected we were. Um, so I've said this before. I didn't know how to be a man. I didn't know what a man was. It was kind of by trial and error. It was kind of just learning from my mistakes and learning from different people, sometimes remote, oftentimes remote, just seeing what people are doing. And I think some of that also comes from just like trusting my instincts. I think there's a lot of things about men, and probably the same thing for women, where it's just instinctual. But we're being told not to trust our instincts. When you have self-esteem issues, when you're depressed, right? When you have anxiety, all those things that I went through, you don't trust yourself, right? You don't listen to yourself. You blame yourself actually, for everything. And I started to trust myself. I started to listen to myself. I started listening to other people as well. And I started implementing certain things that made sense, that didn't, and got rid of stuff that didn't make sense. Actually, it's funny. Are you familiar with the online community, like the Manosphere and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So I have a weird relationship with it currently, but I am one of those people who can see something and say like, all right, that's BS, that's entertainment, that's true, right? So I'm pretty good at that. Some people aren't. Some people see that they take the entertainment as being everything.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, that's clearly they're being hyperbolic. It's entertainment, but this part is true. Um, there was a period of time that I felt like there were certain people, definitely not all of them, but there were certain people who were part of the manosphere that were actually somewhat beneficial. Um, as far as discussing certain things that I never heard discussed before. And talking about male to female interactions, not in a way that I heard before. Really, to be honest with you, it comes from evolution biology is basically what they're describing, like male to female interactions and things of that nature. They just don't call it that. That's something that you kind of learn later on. But what they're saying is true. They kind of just take that portion and inject it into its own ideology. But, I didn't know that at the time. And so I'm listening to it and I'm like, that makes sense. All right, that other stuff doesn't make sense, but that makes sense. And I started to implement it in my life. And I would even watch the stuff with she was my girlfriend at the time. She's not my wife, but I would watch some of this with my wife and we would talk. We would have interactions and we'd pause and have these discussions and really like iron out these ideas with each other. And I think that was actually something really beneficial for me. I know a lot of people don't really like talk about like the manosphere being beneficial for men,
Mhm.
because now it just appears to be uh, a men's grift that is wholly ideological, that just appears to be the male version of feminism at this point. But at one point, there were certain people that weren't completely like that, that had some good ideas and they had some truth, and they weren't complete douchebags. So, so I could watch them and say, I think they're right. Kevin Samuels is the first person that comes to mind. My wife and I used to watch him. We talk, and I didn't agree with everything he says, but there were a lot of things that he said. And he's like, he has a point. That makes sense. And we would have these discussions. But to kind of go back to your original question, I think the manosphere actually helped me, even within my relationship as a man and interacting with my wife and becoming more confident in myself, and understanding like you need to be confident. That's important. That's in traction. To put yourself first as a man, because if you do better, your wife does better, right? And to not put all of your importance into a woman, because she actually doesn't even want that, right? It's all these different things. And I was doing the opposite for quite a while. Whatever you want to do. No, she doesn't actually want that. She wants you to make the decision, right? She wants you to take the lead. She wants you to do these things. She wants to feel secure with a secure man. And there was periods of time that I wasn't secure. So I often learn from my mistakes, just so you know. Yeah. So becoming a man for me was a lot harder. And I don't know if you had the same experience, but it was a lot harder for me because I didn't have that male figure on a day-to-day basis to kind of show me what this looks like. But I really, the last thing I'll say is I really saw how important all this stuff was when my son became a teenager. And people would tell me like, your son is watching you. And they didn't mean that like figuratively, they meant that literally. Like, my son's watching me. He's watching what I do. He's watching my mannerisms. He wants to feel some sort of closeness with me. He wants to get into the same type of stuff that I'm into. I'm his role model. And that's something that I never really thought about before. I think my motive of being a father was to not be my father. And I realized that like, it's deeper than that. It's more of training my son and preparing him for the world, right? To giving him the keys so he doesn't struggle the same way that I did. He's going to struggle no matter what, right? That's what being a man is. To be a man means to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But being prepared to struggle, I think is different. Being aware, like, all right, you're about to go through some shit. Okay, I'm prepared to go through some shit. It's going to be okay because I have a plan and this is what I'm trying to do. Rather than like get hit with something and not be prepared for it, and then you're down in the dumps like I was.
That's excellent. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. And I want to ask you about the flip side of that question, so to speak, and much of modern feminism. So again, Nancy Piercy, who I mentioned, and Mary Harrington, there's lots of interesting writers also at Mary Harrington, also Unheard, are offering this alternative feminism, which I think is important. But we're still suffering with in the popular culture with a lot of the ill effects of that certain wave of feminism and so on. That's dominant cyborg feminism, as Mary calls it. I wonder what role that has played in the States, and say, including for African Americans, and disintegrating the family and so on. And I suppose, why do you think it's so enduring, and what are some of the alternatives that we might offer? Because whenever you were speaking there, it reminded me of, there's this great idea in Ivan Illich where he talks about the corruption of the best is the worst, and I think this is an example where women have that. It's obviously it's both sexes have, they can be emotional and they can be open and all this kind of stuff, but as a general point, it seems to be women are more empathetic and so on, and
Right.
more susceptible to a lot of the the lies of the state, that it sort of manipulates their good nature into thinking, well, we have to do this, we have to look after this person, as if it's caring, whenever it has these rotten fruits, so to speak, that we talked about earlier. Would you like to speak to that, and how we might navigate that from your perspective.
So the feminism thing is interesting because I think you're absolutely right. I always feel like I have to say this. When no one has a problem with women having equal rights, women voting, most people don't. Most rational people don't. I think rational people don't. I wouldn't even say most. Rational people don't have a problem with this stuff, right? If a woman wants to have children or not have children, that's purely her decision, whatever she wants to do, things like that. So I'm all for those things. I grew up in a single parent home. I saw my mother do incredible things, have a career. She kind of had to take care of us. Now, in my opinion, what I think is happening is feminism has turned into telling women that the best way to be a woman is to be a flawed man, right? So it tells women to discard all the wonderful things that are unique to women and to be similar to men. Even more so, to be a caricature of a man, right? So not even exactly the same, to be combative for combative sake, to be aggressive, being a boss bitch, like no guy's like, yeah, I'm a boss asshole. Like, no guy's purposefully like, yeah, look at me. He's trying to do that. He might be an asshole, but he's not, that's not a, it's not a term of endearment. But I think feminism has poisoned femininity, has made women think that the things that feel natural, we talked about instincts. We talked about what feels good, what feels right, what feels natural. And it tells them to ignore what feels natural and go with something that doesn't. And what feels natural is actually old-fashioned, right? But it's, in my opinion, our instincts are like, it's like signals. And God made us this way for a reason. We have those signals to keep us on course, right? This is the direction that you should go. So I'm not a big fan of what feminism has turned into, especially how it's contributed to the conflict between men and women. We look at the dating world and it's men's fault, it's women's fault, it's men's fault. Women suck, women are whores, men suck, all they want to do is have sex. Like, everybody's making the same complaints about each other. And really, they don't even talk about actually what the problem is. The problem is that they're trying to date strangers. That's actually what the problem is. Why are they dating strangers? Well, it's because we live disconnected lives now in the West. And we don't grow up in communities the same way that we used to. And because we don't build communities, we don't know anybody. So now you have to try to take one encounter with someone and determine if this is a life partner or not. And that's not what we used to do. So I don't know if you're a single guy or any. Are you single?
Married, yeah.
Are you married? Okay,
Yep.
cool. You're all set then. Well, actually, since you're married, I have a question for you, if you don't mind me asking.
No, work away.
When you met your wife, did you already know who she was, or did you meet her through someone that you knew?
So I was living in London at the time. I was teaching over there. we met online.
Oh, you met online? Okay.
Which is kind of a cringe looking back, but it obviously worked out well for us, thank God. And I used a platform where you could be very specific about what you wanted, that they had the same values and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
That was quite good, better than Tinder and any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. You probably shouldn't get married if you meet somebody on Tinder.
That's right.
No, I was curious because I actually asked this of my followers on Twitter once, if they knew like if they either knew the person or if they met them through somebody that they knew. And most of the people said they it was one of the two, that they weren't a complete stranger, that they met them through somebody. And the same thing with me. I knew her brother, and her brother was the social proof for me. So she felt comfortable interacting with me because of it. So I bring that up because of the whole social proof thing. I think it's really important, especially for women, to feel comfortable. Comfort is really, really big for them. And without that social proof and without that person, like, tell me a little bit more about this person. Oh, they're cool. All right, they're cool. All right, I feel more relaxed. Versus person online, they're like having to look at like every mannerism. They looked that way when I said this question. Like, you know, it makes it really, really hard. Also, one thing, I don't, we're kind of veering off a little bit, but I just think it's interesting. I like male to female dynamics. I think that stuff's fascinating. But one thing that's interesting is why dating is difficult is because not only are you meeting someone who's a stranger, but since they're a stranger, they have no investment in you and there's no repercussions, right? So if I don't like you and then I just decide not to call you back or ghost you, well, there's no repercussions. I hurt your feelings because you thought we had something. But if I met you through, like, use my wife, for example, I met her through her brother. And if I did that, her brother would be pissed, right? And he would try to come after me. So there's repercussions for treating that person negatively. And that's another problem that's faced. So many people get ghosted because, well, they have no attachment to them. They don't even know who they are. They don't know where they live, nothing like that. They don't know anybody in their circle whatsoever. There's zero repercussions to being rude to you, treating you like trash, being a pervert. Like there's no repercussions. But if you were meeting somebody and you can't do that. Like if you were in high school, you can't do that to the girl in high school because she's going to tell all these people that you did X, Y, and Z, and then the rumor's going to come out, and there's going to be repercussions against you, and your name's going to messed up. Like there's all types of repercussions. So the lack of repercussions for treating someone terribly in dating is actually fueling the problem as well.
That's really interesting. I must send you an article actually after this interview. There's a Dr. Vegan Gorian who, in line with what you're describing, has written on the importance of chivalry properly understood and having these institutions in place to protect people for those very reasons. We're not just these little autonomous individuals cut off from our families and our friends, and there are checks and balances built into the system, which, to your point, I think unfortunately in many ways we've lost. And
Yeah.
I think that's again something folks like Marion Harrington are helpful in pointing out, and how if we change the material, not that you're necessarily a Marxist if you believe this, but you change some of the material conditions around these male-female relationships and so on, then things will improve, hopefully. God willing. And thanks for that, Adam. And I wanted to move on next to ask you a bit more about your move towards the Christian faith. And I think about it in my context, in part because my wife, she's from Zimbabwe, and she's a believing Christian and so on, and she's always been a believing Christian. But some of her family have drifted away from the Christian faith, sort of believing it's the white man's religion and this kind of stuff. And I think there is, in modernity, there is that a challenge that people are going to have to come across and overcome. And I'm just curious, as an African American, I think from my perspective, before I became a believing Christian, I was even struck then as a secular person by Martin Luther King Jr. and the power of his rhetoric and some of the ideas that he was coming out with. And then I got into Thomas Sowell and figures like that, Booker T. Washington, the art of Henry Osawa Tanner, Harry Tubman, lots of great figures. Again, as part of the American story, and I would root them, to your point, you don't want to just talk about black issues and so on. I think this goes beyond that. I think those figures are part of the Judeo-Christian culture, and I think they're civilizationally important, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I wonder about some of your challenges.
Um, some of my challenges as far as faith
In
or
so coming from that agnostic background to the Christian
hmm,
faith, again to your point, we're not just rationalistic creatures. We have this emotional side, and you're sort of told that this religion is tainted and it belongs to someone else and so on. How have you overcome that? And yeah, if that makes sense.
um, it was interesting because I think we hear a lot of like the Marxist terminology when it comes to faith now.
Hmm.
But at the time when I was going through my uh, transformation, so to speak, it wasn't in the it wasn't in the mainstream conversation. As far as that, even like in politics, like the way of describing it that way, you might hear from some like radical, you know, black pro-black who might be like, that's the white man's religion or something like that. But guess what? A lot of black people like white man's religion. I don't know what to tell you. Uh, um, so that part never really hit me. I
Hmm.
think it was more so um, questions that I couldn't have answered. Um, and like you said, part of the problem is because you are rational and we like to think that we're proof oriented. Um, well, where's the proof that God is real and all these other things? And I think for me, I got my proof, right? But just not in the way that people think that you would have proof, like you can hold it into your hands or you took a picture of them, right?
Hmm.
um, but it's more of uh, probability of things happening versus coincidence versus something else. And I'm one to easily say, ah, that was a coincidence. But at a certain point, it's like, to me, it's like there's too many coincidences for it to be a coincidence, you know? Um, like I mentioned before, the people who've looked out for me, um, the the opportunities that were given to me, or not given to, but like provided for me, um, because of something else that happened. Um, like just like is I don't even know, even after writing the book, first off, as someone who didn't go to college, who has no background in writing, for me to write a book that includes psychology and human behavior and have psychologists, multiple psychologists confirm like what you wrote is actually correct. And I actually have a psychologist friend now, Dr. Chloe Carmichael. We met up one time in Florida, and she said, so I want to tell you what you described here that is called this. So she was telling me the terms of what it was, and I didn't know. I didn't even know I had a term. I mean, probably does, of course, like everything has a term, but I didn't know what it was. I knew what it looked like. Um, so for me to be able to express psychology in a layman's kind of way, in a very understanding way, um, and talk about family dynamics and things of that nature, to be able to do it that way, um, the moments where I sit down and for an hour to an hour and a half just blurt out all this stuff. I tell people all the time, I didn't write that book by myself, right? Um, you know, my wife and I were dating while we were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, and I would get to work 6 in the morning and I would start writing. And then when I was done writing for the day, I would send her what I wrote. And I would do that basically every day. I wrote basically 5 days a week. Um, and I would send it to her, and she tells me all the time, she's like, I remember when you would send me this, and I'm like, he really wrote this? Like she was really dumbfounded by like the the message that I was getting across, and how profound some of the things that I was saying. there's times when people tell me quotes and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I wrote that. Like I just like, that sounds really profound. Oh, I wrote that. Oh, I forgot I wrote that. So it's that kind of thing where it's very like I don't feel like it's just me. Like the instincts, when we talk about instincts, I don't think that's all me. I think that's something that God instilled into me, like he instills into everybody. It doesn't matter if you listen to what he's trying to tell you, where he's trying to uh navigate you. I've had moments where I thought about sinning and I was worried that I was going to be put in a position to sin. And when that situation came, the temptation wasn't there. And I was like, oh, thank God. I felt so relieved. Like I thought somebody might be there and that didn't happen. Um, it's that kind of thing where like there's just too many coincidences, you know.
Yeah.
But I just see much of my adult life as tests. Um, like when I tell you I was homeless, uh, not to get into like the complete story because it's a little long, but I had moved to Tennessee. I was supposed to stay with someone who was a friend. Come to find out, he lied to me about a bunch of stuff, and he didn't have his own place, and he had nowhere for me to stay. Um, the good thing was that I had a job waiting for me when I got there. So when I sat down with my boss, he's like, "So how's everything? Everything's good with your friend?" And normally I would just lie and just deal with it. I was going to sleep in my car, but I decided to tell him the truth. And by the end of that day, him and the rest of the supervisors pulled money together to put me in a hotel room until I got enough money to get my own place. They never asked for any money back or anything. I for sure worked my ass off. Anytime it was overtime, you got it. I'm there. Like I was the best worker because I felt so grateful for what they did. I really didn't want to sleep in my car. It's not the most comfortable vehicle to sleep in. Most cars aren't. Um, but it's stuff like that. Like you have these people, yes, you're going through this moment, but somebody comes in and says, here, let me help you a little bit. And they did, and they didn't have to. Like I wasn't expecting anything. I just think about moments like that. And in this modern leftist world, um, that manager was white. My supervisors who also pitched in were black and white. One of them was gay. Like they're just people who, and they kept it to themselves. Also, nobody else knew what I was going through, which I appreciated as well. And we never talked about it. They quite literally paid for it, took care of it, and I just went and I stayed, and that was it. And I appreciate stuff like that, and I think about like, why did this person come into my life like that? They didn't have to. Um, I think it's so many different things, but like the past 2.5 years has been absolutely insane. The amount of coincidences, even with me writing for the New York Post. I love writing for the New York Post. Absolutely love writing for the New York Post. And that was purely by accident. I had a tweet that went viral. My friend Batia said, can you write an article? I said, sure. I wrote an article. She wasn't able to use it because somebody else submitted something sounding similar. And so she was like, I asked her, I was like, well, what can I do with it? She's like, why don't you send it to New York Post? I was like, you have an email? She's like, here you go. I was like, okay. So I just sent it to them. And they replied back in 24 hours saying, great article, it's going in today. It's like, what? I had no idea. Wasn't even trying to be in the New York Post. And from there, it's been a relationship for over a year. I write for them almost weekly. And I'm not a columnist, which is even more incredible. And now I'm friends with the editor, and she's been to my place and multiple times and spent time with each other and had intimate conversations, stuff like that. And it's just been a real blessing to meet all these great, wonderful people. along the way, and I'm like, I was supposed to be here to do stuff like this. Like it's really meaningful for me. So um to me, it's more than just politics. It's more than just like, I write some op-eds. To me, I feel like I'm making an impact. I'm not super famous or anything like that. But with the platform that I do have, I feel like I am helping people. And maybe just giving some people hope, which is uh, probably enough. So yeah, I don't know if I've completely answered your question, but I guess what I was trying to get at is all of these different coincidences, all these different events, the ups and downs. The downs were the tests, the ups were the rewards for passing the test and staying in it. Um, the moments of meeting special people, absolutely special people who I'm incredibly thankful for meeting, to inspire me to keep doing what I'm doing. The random emails that I get from people who encourage me to do what I'm doing. I've quite literally, and it never happened to me before, but I quite literally had people walk up to me and said, God is inside you, right? And that's a thing that kind of pushes you back a little bit. And they didn't have to say that. They meant it. Like they're serious, and these are believers, right? So and like one last thing I'll say is someone who's impactful, and she now writes for me for Wrong Speak. My friend Sonia Dalmans. She's Dutch actually, and she saw an article I wrote in the New York Post and asked me if I would interview with her for her column that she had in a Dutch paper. So I interviewed with her through a Zoom call, and we talked for like 2 hours. And I absolutely love talking to her. I come to find out she's a theologian, and not just with Christianity, but also Islam as well. But she's a Christian herself. And she told me after that, towards the end of that call, she said, you're the most Christ-like person I've met in a long time. And like, that still sticks with me. I think about that sometimes. I'm like, that's very high praise from someone who, talks to all different types of religious figures, and she sees something in me that other people do. So um I guess what I'm saying is I don't think any of that is an accident. I think that's all the proof I need.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Adam. And I'll not keep you much longer. I just want to play on what you're describing there and link it to a few things that are going off in my mind. So, one of them is again back to figures like Jordan Peterson. I think to what you're describing, they are doing at a kind of societal level or pointing to it at a societal level that the Christian faith actually has a greater explanatory power regarding how people behave. It's got this instilled wisdom from thousands of years. It's again, it's not an accident. It's like the best psychology that you could possibly get using these categories of evil and everything and spirits describes more accurately how people actually are than their little brains on sticks, as if we're primarily rational creatures that just choose from our options, like you see in modernity and post-modernity and so on. And I think it's powerful too because you show with your work and with your person this victory beyond victimhood, which I think again is a properly understood Christian thing. There's this idea, again from figures like Illich, that the best is the worst. So you take that the care for the victim in Christianity, and then you sort of bastardize it, and then it's all about the victim. But it's Christian life is also about victory over death and Christ's resurrection and so on. And like those questions about the historicity of Christ and did he really rise from the dead and all, I think there actually are good answers for those and good proofs and everything as far as that goes. But to your point, it goes beyond that. It's how people's lives have been transformed and society itself has been transformed. And I think what you're describing is intertwining with some of the stuff like Tom Holland has spoken about with Dominion and Ayaan Hirsi Ali's recent conversion. And it's an exciting time for me exploring some of these things, and I'm grateful for your part in that, and I'm grateful for what you've said today. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and God bless you, and all the best in the future with your baptism and everything too, I should say.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And just at the end to close, where can my viewers or listeners find out more about you and your work then, Adam?
I would say for the most part, check out my Substack. I try to have everything that I'm doing kind of run through there. It's adambcoleman.substack.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'll link that in the description as well.
Thank you.
I'm going there. Nobody can stop me. Ooh, I'm going there. Don't you wanna go too? I'm going there. Nobody can stop me. I'm on my way. I'm going there. I'm going there. Nobody